staying with us now, who's
everyone, we're just having a little chat while we're waiting for people to join. So bear with us for a couple of minutes and just enjoy the conversation. You were saying, Patrick?
No, I was just saying we've got a lady staying with us at the moment who's from Valladolid, and that's the wine producing country, and of course all the tractors are out there in force because that's a community that's feeling really hard done by regulation, water, and that's happening across Europe.
Exactly.
Well, the English term is turf wars, but now it's all water wars, like
water wars. Yeah.
Right. No, turf is not allowed anyway. I'm married to an Irish woman, and turf is no longer allowed to use peats and stuff for the fireplaces. Remember when you used to go to Ireland or to Scotland? The smell of peats.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's no longer there. You cannot heat your places with turf.
Right. Let's start. Thank you, everyone. Good morning. It's 1 minute past 9 in London, and welcome everyone to our first of the mini-series on Techmatters with Nordic Tourism Collective. We're very pleased to be joined today by 3 guests who I will introduce in no particular order, but I'll start with our guest, Nikki Pagels, who is Chief Growth Officer of Muda in Finland. Patrick Richards, who is Director of Terra Verde Sustainability Solutions, and Eduardo Santander, who is CEO of the ETC. And welcome to our guests. We're going to be talking today about technology, and specifically about how technology can help our sustainability efforts. And I think what we're going to do with this webinar is look at the broader picture. So we're not going to be talking about emissions necessarily. We're going to talk about what sustainability means in the round and how technology can help achieve the sustainability objectives that we're trying to attain. 2 things. This is an interactive session as much as we can. We will welcome your comments, welcome any suggestions. If you have any questions, post them in the chat, which is on the screen. And we'll take the questions as and when we can, and we'll answer. And also at the same time, if you feel that we need to go in a different direction and we need to talk about something else, then equally give us your ideas, give us your suggestions. So the way this is going to work is this webinar is the first of our mini-series. We're introducing technology as a solution to our sustainability quests. There will be a series of follow-up webinars or follow-up series where each one will then dive into a specific area of technology, and we will look at each of the technological options available within each of those sectors. And what's going to happen is in subsequent weeks, we will also then have individual companies and individual technological solutions to come along and actually make a pitch and actually show you a very, very short excerpt of what they do and what their solutions can offer. So it's a real life workshop type of environment where you can see the different types of options which may be available. But that's for the future, and that's going to be in future webinars. So for the sake of this webinar, all we're doing is setting the scene. We're introducing the concept and really looking at the different types of technology which are available and which should be considered when you're looking for sustainable solutions for your business. So we'll move on. First of all, I think what it'd be good to do is understand where we are in a big picture, and we've invited the CEO of the ETC, Eduardo Santander, to give us an overview from a European perspective about sustainability, how the ETC views sustainability at the moment, perhaps, and maybe looking forward, and also maybe perhaps what's coming down the line. What can we expect from the ETC? What can we expect from the EU? What's their view of where we're going to be today, tomorrow, next year, in 5 years' time? So, Eduardo, if I could hand over to you, maybe you can give us a paint a picture for us, and we can dive into it and see where we are.
Thank you so much, Andy, and thanks to the Nordic Tourism Collective for this kind invitation, and to Nicole and Patrick for joining this webinar too. Well, let me start maybe with some optimism, because this is the only thing that is going to help us in the future. Tourism in Europe is doing pretty well. We knew that something is going to happen after the COVID crisis, that we thought for some reason that tourism is going to obviously go back to levels of 2019, but we thought this is going to happen only for just a few years. We thought that 22, 23 will be like the big years, but we thought that we would start seeing in 2024, 2025, and so on, which we will start seeing some kind of drops because people maybe ran out of money. There was no savings available, inflation, wars, polycrisis, and so on. But guess what? We were wrong. We were absolutely wrong in forecasting what the future of tourism in Europe will bring us. And what we are seeing now for the year to come, or the year 24 and 25, is that people are willing to save in other aspects of their lives, but they are not willing to save any penny on travel and tourism, on their beloved and very much appreciating vacation time. This implies a very important issue for this very webinar, because we are seeing that tourism in Europe is not only becoming one of the most fascinating and growing sectors with 10% of GDP, producing 25-30 million jobs, but it's becoming also an issue for key policy items such as sustainability and the digital transformation. In fact, as you know, there is like a transition pathway towards a lot of targets, particularly with regards to climate change and CO2 emissions. We will, I'm sure, talk about them in the next minutes. But I think the most important thing is to define what is going to be the role of digitalization and technology for tourism, and particularly in the issue of solving and measuring sustainable indicators and so on. So now we measure tourism in a very old-fashioned way. We're still counting tourists, arrivals, their expenditures, their bed nights and so on. And now we're in the search of very, very complex indicators, whereas it's like a perception of destinations, perception of locals about tourism, consumption of resources, whether it's water, whether it's food, whether it's quality of the air, whether it's the quality of the infrastructure. And this implies a huge matrix of technological solutions. For me and for ETC, the definition of what technology and digital transformation, and if you want, datification of travel and tourism, is the solution to turning travelers' interactions and behaviors into actionable insights. What does it mean? Very fancy words there. Whether you are a hotel, a tour operator, or anyone else in the sector, if you embrace this digital transformation, harnessing data, or embracing digital tools, business can meet the expectation of the future tourism and gain a competitive edge. In simple words, how can technology really help us, not only forecasting the future of tourism, the famous numbers, but also shaping it? And this is a very important angle that we have to tackle. We know that it's a lot of, in the media now, the role of artificial intelligence and how that these computers will help us creating solutions, but also they are creating some kind of sorrows to level of regulation, and particularly in the regulatory framework of the European landscape. We know that privacy is a huge issue, and the sharing of data. So from a tourism point of view, we think that Europe is still pretty much in a baby status with regards to tourism, and it's very patchy. The European landscape and different destinations and a very different life cycle with regards to their digitalization and technological transformation efforts. We have some Nordic countries being very advanced, some Central European too, and some Southern European too, but some haven't even started. So we see here a big dichotomy in between the advancements and the opportunity, but also the issues of privacy and security that cannot be emphasized enough, and also how can we deal with the collaboration and competition at the same time. So we know data is just so important for travel and tourism. And I would like to emphasize something very important for destinations right now. For the first time in European tourism history, we see a phenomenon called the social rejection of tourism, which is like a perception that tourism is not doing too much for people's livelihoods in their communities. And this is whether you call it over tourism, over trampling, overcrowded destinations, or, you know, like massified, it doesn't matter how you call it, but it is the perception that tourism is not doing the right thing for the people and for particular for local communities. This is the most worrisome part of for us right now, the development of this new exponential growth of tourism in Europe in the next decade, and also the dual transition. How are we going to be able to match that demand that it is for tourism with the targets? Some of them will tell you that, you know, are already now impossible. You know, it's some of them should be reached by 2030, and it's already 2024. So we just have 6 years to go. And then how are we been dealing also with explaining that tourism is more, you know, than people moving around and without having interactions, you know, with what is the reality of before even starting this webinar, we were chatting, Patrick, Nicole, and Andy, myself, about, you know, the water scarcity in some regions in Europe, and we see that this is going to be the new phenomena, is that we have to measure tourism in a way which it hasn't been done yet, and whether, you know, data and technology, and particularly even artificial intelligence, will help us to gather information that it's not available on the shelf right now, and that it becomes pretty sophisticated when it comes, you know, to data harnessing here. Why I started saying that I'm optimistic, because, you know, I see also from the research that we do that people are very conscious about the climate emergency, climate change, if you want. It is also very tangible in all our geographies, whether you live in the south, north, or central, west, or eastern Europe. There's something happening around you, whether it's related to tourism or not, it doesn't matter. But, you know, it's something related to agriculture, or it doesn't snow, it doesn't rain, it rained too much, or, you know, the crops are coming too early or too late, and this has yet such a spillover effect on the tourism industry. So we know, we always said years ago, you know, the spillover effect on the economy of tourism, because, you know, it's not about, you know, people traveling and staying people, it's just they produce jobs, you know, jobs that are related and non-related to tourism, agriculture, you know, services, you know, that creates infrastructure and so on. That's the reason why we say tourism is so good for people. But now we see that, you know, the intrinsic pillars that sustain tourism are at stake, whether it's food supply, whether it's water supply, whether it's energy supply, as we saw recently with also political conflicts. So we also say that tourism is like a lasagna, no? And allow me to use this gastronomic analogy. You know, in the lasagna, you have layers of different kind of things, whether it's the pasta sheets, or it's the, you know, the meat or the cheese or whatever you put. If you're a veggie, you maybe put like some aubergine. But you see, tourism works like that. That to have the full dish, you have to have very, very different layers working together, and, you know, making the flavor and the combination to be something that it's. The problem is that the oven that we're putting that lasagna in is no longer working well. And that oven is what I call, you know, the environment from a natural resource point of view and climate, but also there's a social environment. And here, Andy, I would like to, you know, to really underline this. For the first time, I see that there is a huge change of perception of whether tourism is good or not for people equally, those traveling and those receiving tourism. And this is something we have to reflect upon when we come to technology, because technology is enabling so many, let's say, bookings, actions, or if you want, reactions, or so it creates obviously valuable businesses. It's making automatic many things that were very cumbersome. So it's very helpful on one other side, but it's also creating new flows of tourism in places that were not either prepared and they didn't know how to deal with tourism, or places that they did know, at least with the model of 50 years ago, and now they are confronted with a new kind of tourism. Our latest research gives us some perspective also about climate change affecting the perception of destinations. People are starting to say that they prefer northern. This is very important for the Nordic Tourism Collective, because our latest research says that people are more inclined now in summer, not all of them, there's a percent of them to go to more northern European destinations in the summer months, such as, like Sweden, Denmark, Ireland, Bulgaria was also in the thing. Changing the pattern, that doesn't mean that people will stop going to the Mediterranean basin in this exodus, seeking for the sun in the summer. But there is a pattern there, a pattern that means that people are starting to be educated enough, informed enough to understand that they want to spend their precious holiday time, the one that they want to save money on, in doing activities that are not the normal or the standard tourism product in Europe. Same with winter tourism. We saw that with the snow weak winters, all these mountains resorts are starting to turn into all-year destinations, having to offer alternatives, to snows that are winters that are very snow poor. So you see, we're talking about a multi-factorial environment with a lot of risk related, a lot of investment related. Also, I know Nicole and Patrick will talk about more the carbon that we produce. And here it's not about pointing who does more, but it's true that we have to create a dialogue platform to not just only being accused of producing emissions, but also being the solution on how to mitigate them and start producing less. Or
Eduardo, if I could just stop you, it is that's fantastic. There's quite a few things there, and I love your lasagna analogy. I assume that the ETC or the EU is, the collective, we talk about tourism being a force for good all the time, because tourism gets such bad flack. And we think that actually, if it's done sustainably, it can be a force for good. It could have very positive economic impacts on societies. It could have very good, and if it's done, so the whole idea of using technology to facilitate that is very much what but what is the ETC, just very quickly, is the ETC looking at this within legislative, or is the EU looking at it within legislating? So if you're not going to be sustainable, so we'll mandate it, so you have to be. Is that something which is coming down the line quickly?
Well, our approach is that we don't want to. We had the bad memory of COVID, of being turbo regulated overnight, and we couldn't move, we couldn't travel, and so we know how it looks like to be told what to do and what not to do. And we definitely don't. Of course, we want to reach regulation targets already announced and in agreement with all different partners in the industry, and aviation, transportation, and all other ecosystems, industrial ecosystems of Europe. But here, do we really want to go that far? Let's put it in simple words. What do we want to sustain? Because until now, in my opinion, the sustainability of tourism has been a way to sustain a business model from the past as long as it gets, and as long as we can, to keep the profits high and to keep people happy, whether it's at a social level or at an industry level. And this is not working any longer, because we see that we live on the edge. We live on the edge of,
I think what we need to focus on is the fact that tourism can be a force for good for destinations. It can be a force for good for society, and it also can be a force for good for the individual businesses who are doing it, because if they do,
and they allow me to say that is a big claim, that is a force for good, because when we say these things, we don't empirically really demonstrate that. We say that we produce a lot of jobs. Are they quality jobs? Not all the time. We say that we produce a spillover effect on the economy. To whom? Where is the leakage of tourism? Does really the investment of tourism stay in the destination, or where does it go? So you see, I think technology is going to play a huge role in helping empirically prove that our claim that tourism is a force for good is right. Because now I would not say that so loud, because I would not be able to justify myself, or to have data providing that I'm right.
Well, let's move on, Eduardo, because I know time is pressing, and I know we're all busy people. So what we're going to do then, we'll take that and we'll say that let's hope that using technology we can demonstrate, we can prove that tourism is a force for good, not only for destinations, not only for society, but also for the businesses as well, because by adopting sustainable practices, they can become more efficient and they can save money and they can become more profitable. So it's good for everybody. So I think, so thank you for that, Eduardo. That's brilliant. So what we're going to do now is going to move on and actually look a little bit into the technological aspects of that and where technology fits into this big picture. And I'm just going to share my screen quickly, which looks like this. So this is a... so this is, I assume everyone can see this. This is our header, technology for sustainability. And just introducing really how this works, we're going to look at technology is such a big subject. And I think what we're trying to say is, don't try to do it all yourself. Let's take an overview of the subject. Let's see what's out there, and then once we can see what mountains there are, then we can start climbing them. But let's not try and just look up and think, oh my God, this is so complicated, this is so difficult, I'm not even going to start. Let's take it step by step and really see how we get on. So we've heard from lots of people, and we read it in the papers, that customers are searching for sustainability, they're more aware of sustainability. At the Skiff X last year, they were saying that 90% of customers are looking for sustainable options in their travel. Whether they buy sustainable products is another debate, but they're more aware of sustainability as being something that they want to buy as a vacation, as a holiday product. Research also shows that actually people are prepared to pay more for sustainable travel products. Whether they actually, when it comes to actually parting with the cash, we don't know, but the indications, the sentiments are that they are. And they also 6% people say that they're also ready to offset their travel with carbon offsetting. So again, big picture, big subjects, big debate about all of these issues, whether the demand is there, whether they're willing to pay more, or whether they should, or whether they're ready to, or whether they're willing to pay for offsetting at the same time. But sustainability is more about emissions, and sustainability is also about the governance of how you do it. It's about the social impacts of sustainability. It's about the socio-demographic implications of tourism, and it's also about the economic aspects as well. And really what we're saying here is that by increasing your sustainability and reducing your impact has a positive impact, or can have a positive impact on your business and your bottom line and your profitability. And using technology is really the way we go with that. And we can shift our business processes by using technology. We can start breaking down barriers. And importantly and crucially, we can enable, using technology, we can enable collaboration by removing the silos within companies and within organizations, and enabling cooperation between workers. So we're using an analogy of Eduardo used his lasagna. We're going to stay on the food theme. We're going to create a pie. And the pie is all the various bits, all the slices of technology that fit together. And we don't have to dive straight in and start eating the whole thing at once. We can eat one slice at a time, and we can take one bit at a time. But which part do we start with first? So let's have a look at our pie. This is our pie. We searched the internet high and low for something which actually gave us an overview of technological aspects within sustainability. We couldn't find one, so we invented one and we made our own up. If anyone has any suggestions that we may be missing a slice, then please let us know. But this is our pie as we see it. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Nikki, because I think Nikki's going to walk us through the pie a little bit and talk a little bit about the various slices and what those slices actually mean. So Nikki, are you okay with that?
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. So thank you very much, first of all, Andy, for having me today. It's a pleasure to be here and a super important topic, I think, for all of us. I'm also really excited to be introducing the pie. I hope this is something that helps to kind of make a very, very big topic become more manageable and more digestible for businesses, as well as also our industry as a whole. So I'll walk you through the first three, and then hopefully Patrick will help me out with the last two, starting with building and operating. So as I see it, technology is very much the solution to the future of our industry. I think Eduardo painted a very good picture that we are really on the edge of a cliff at the moment, with perceptions in the market changing, customer demand changing, business needs changing, and even our workforce changing. So if we start with where we need to start as an industry, well, it comes down to the core of every single business and how we build and operate those businesses. Now, by building, I don't mean necessarily physically building a hotel, resort, or tourism attraction. What I mean by that is building our products. So whether that be that hotel, resort, or tourism attraction, or whether that be a tour, coming down to the core of what you are actually offering the market is key to the success and key to the sustainability of our industry, essentially. Now, there are little bits of technology that can help us to do this. A huge amount of gadgets already exist on the market, including equipment that can help us also create more sustainable designs, help us to monitor and measure all of the different parts of our business. So as Andy mentioned, I'm originally from Finland. I'll give you a good example here. My country is full of igloos. I'm sure many of you have been up to Lapland as well. And we also have a huge amount of saunas. In fact, in our country, we have more saunas than what we do people. And a really simple gadget to maybe highlight here is monitoring, for instance, electricity use in those saunas. So electricity is now the most common kind of tool to heat up a sauna. Especially in an igloo where it's minus 40 degrees outside, you can get fantastic gadgets that basically monitor the electricity in your entire resort for the entire day. And if you notice, for instance, a bit of a spike, you can actually turn off the electricity, which then has a direct impact on that bottom line. Equally here also, you start to take a look at, in my part of the world, kind of green tourism in terms of tours. So a huge amount of cycling tours have emerged on the market. I know, Andy, you're also involved in tours that are based on public transport. All of that can be facilitated with various different types of technology that help to basically create the product. And then on the operating side, we also start to take a look at the workforce itself. And this really comes to kind of the operation of any business and breaking down silos between different departments, breaking down silos also when it comes to inventory management and when it comes to making sure that your entire business is transparent and also workable by a workforce that is more and more so multitasking and becoming leaner and leaner. So I guess the kind of building and operating piece is really understanding your own business and taking a look at which technology solutions can help you to build the foundation of the core of that business into the future, and also facilitate tourism products that are actually lucrative to the market going forward.
So Nikki, just to ask you a question. So does the operation of hotels fit into this slice, or does the operation of hotels fit into the monitoring and measuring slice?
I think they work hand in hand. So monitoring and measuring obviously gives you the tools to be able to understand your business, that then facilitates technology solutions that help you to operate it better. So I guess this is why it's really nice to have this in a wheel, because obviously these slices, while they are pieces of a pie, they are also interlinked because they essentially form the pie. So yes, this has to do with how you operate a hotel, but equally this also has to do with how you operate any other tourism business, whether that's an attraction, whether that's a transport company, whether that's a tour operator agency. Understanding how your technology functions and how it can help you to make your own individual business needs leaner and better, all helps towards the sustainable cause in different ways.
So just to reiterate, what we're going to do in future sessions, we will go through each of these slices in more detail, and we will invite in companies who can provide technological solutions within these slices to give us a brief overview of what they offer and what their products are. So it gives you a real sort of a real life snapshot, if you like, of the types of technology which are available. So shall we move on to another slide, Nikki?
Yeah, sounds good. So collaborating and sharing, this is personally my favorite topic within tourism because I love that lasagna analogy. Well done, Eduardo. That was really good. I guess kind of in order to make a lasagna, not one single ingredient can exist on its own. It all has to collaborate together. Otherwise, you don't get that wowzer effect in your mouth, do you? So it's this is something that's intrinsic to our entire industry, but is often far too fragmented. And here I really see that technology can be the main catalyst for change. So I've highlighted here a couple of different types of technology areas to maybe take a look at. And this goes both in terms of your own business, but also working together with neighbors, working together with your destination, and even wider, working together with your region. So technology solutions that facilitate things like cross-selling, that facilitate brokerage, so taking different products and passing them on and then having slices taken in between, that help also to reduce what Eduardo mentioned in terms of economic leakage. They can all help to kind of make your tourism products in an area more sustainable. And also understanding kind of your routes to market and how your distribution channels are changing and how the landscape of distribution in general is changing is also key to this. So I guess kind of in the past 10 years or so, there's been a couple of very, very big players on the market when it comes to distribution. I think that landscape is very slowly but surely starting to become more diverse, especially as customers are looking for more sustainable options when they are traveling. Many more niche markets are emerging with that, and understanding really how to target those customers is becoming pivotal to making sure that also your distribution networks are sustainable into the future.
Fantastic.
And this is the last slide, or the last little pie slice that I'll talk about, and it's my favorite one as well when it comes to AI. So we all know that AI is definitely here to stay. So last year was our ChatGPT like wowza year, and I think this is something that's going to continue into the future as well. There are a huge amount of AI tools that are now available on the market that can be used to understand our businesses better. Now, where we look at understanding our businesses, this really does need to pivot towards understanding our own business needs and understanding what kind of AI or what kind of technology tools to use to help us predict, to help us forecast, to help us innovate, and also to maybe take a look at how all of these different bits of understanding work together to come up with solutions that might not have been there in the past. So this will be a really interesting session, I think, in understanding how AI can help us to become more sustainable within technology as well.
From my perspective, that's really interesting because my background's in marketing. So I used to use programmatic advertising and stuff, and moving to AI as a whole new game, and that's really fascinating. So do you want to kick off compensation just and then introduce Patrick, Nikki?
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so with the compensation piece here, I guess this really has to do with understanding first and foremost who's taking responsibility for compensating and for mitigating the impact of tourism. So just to kind of intro it, it's worthwhile thinking about whether it's from a business perspective, whether it's from the travelers or passengers perspective, whether it's from the destinations perspective, or whether it's from the industry perspective as a whole. So introducing now, I think, Patrick Richards, you're an expert on understanding compensation and kind of how to go about looking at the market. So I'll pass it over to you to go into it in a bit more depth.
Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Nikki. Yeah, hi everybody, Patrick Richards. To introduce this, actually, I'm going to hand back to Eduardo, because let me tell you, Eduardo doesn't just have a good analogy for lasagna. He also has a great analogy for bathtubs. And rather than me steal it, I think it's best that you introduce this, because it's a great analogy.
That's a good sign that what I say makes sense. You know, like please go ahead.
No, please go for it. Go for it. I thought your analogy was great on the bathtub.
No, of course, you know, like when we were preparing the webinar, we were thinking that, we can be very complacent about this, or we can be controversial. And I would prefer to be controversial on this because, there is a lot of, offsetting models, offsetting options. There's, the market is oversaturated with options that are very difficult to understand. B, even more important, they are impossible to track, to measure, or to compare with. You know, there's not a real benchmark. There are certifications, there are possibilities from planting trees, you know, to doing the most varied things or things, you know, to offset. Well, my analogy here is a bathtube. You know, the bathtube is already full of water, and if the water would be CO2 in our atmosphere, you know, we have the problem. We have an input, which is the tap, and an output, which is the drain. And now we have to decide which goes first, whether, you know, we can compensate people, you know, for turning and the tap off, or, you know, to not putting too much more water on that bathtube, or compensating people, you know, for letting more, like what we call more mitigation, like and try not to create policies of regeneration of, you know, whatever it's natural landscapes or resources and so on. And here is the paradox of the bathtube, that I think there is a lot of focus on people using the tap more indiscriminatory, and it's like okay, you can keep putting more hot water, but if you do something else good for the bathtube or whatever it is, putting in a fancy soap, it's good for the rest of us. And that's the problem. This is the dichotomy between input and output that we have to, I think, tackle. So Patrick, back to you on my bathtube.
Thank you, Eduardo. So to put that into terms, you know, we don't have any problems with growth in our industry. And I think, you know, the WTTC estimate, or they evaluate the GDP of all of the tourism industry globally to be 9 trillion. And they furthermore, then they say that tourism is going to grow to be 15 trillion. So 60% more by 2030. So we don't have any problem with growth. What we have a problem with, and we don't want people to stop getting on planes, is the impact of all of that growth. And we need to start reducing the impact of that growth. And we'll go a little bit more into reduction on this. And of course, you know, as you guys say, carbon isn't everything. Money isn't everything, but that doesn't mean that money's not damn important, and carbon is damn important. It's the most easily embraced by the industry. It's the most easily embraced by the outside world in viewing us. We have something like 8 to 11% of emissions the travel industry counts globally. And that's going to grow if we're going to grow to 15 trillion and we don't start to look at how we can operate and reduce our impact while also operating efficiently. And of course, then there's the risk on top of that of carbon taxes. So just to clear off compensation, and we often talk about this in terms of carbon offsets, is good, but it can't be used as a sticky plaster. Compensation and offsets are good after you've started reducing your impact. And that doesn't just mean in carbon, it means in all of the other resources we're talking about, waste and water and energy, et cetera, and the impact that we're making on the planet. And you know, there are lots of tools out there, as Eduardo says, for looking at your compensation and how you might then offset that. But it's a secondary thing to actually, what are we doing about our own impact, and how do we monitor that? And I really wanted to go, and I suppose really, Andy, this leads to the next part of the pie, which is the measuring and the monitoring.
Just before we move on to that, I'd just like to add, Patrick, I think we spoke earlier, that this compensation is also sort of a fairly it's a complicated subject, and we talked about sort of, you get to greenwashing and all that sort of stuff, and it's a big subject to cover.
Well, to Eduardo's point, you know, technology can be used positively. It can also be used almost as a threat to our industry. And whether you say as a threat is a, you know, so governments are now using, the EU have brought in a regulation called the Green Claims Code, and they're using AI, as are a lot of other authorities, to be able to look at who's making green claims and whether they can substantiate that. So KLM have just been sued successfully in the Dutch courts for making false green claims, and that's going to cost them many millions of euros. So, you know, the technology can be used in various ways, some of which might not be so pleasant, Andy.
Just while we're on compensation, Patrick, very quickly, there's a question just come in from someone who I don't recognize, but the name looks Finnish to me. Cassia. and she's saying, regarding compensation and reducing impact, how about creating positive impact and then measuring that? That's just quite an interesting idea.
I think that comes. I think if that's a great question from Cassia. So we've talked a little bit about this idea of economic leakage, and years ago there was a study by the UN that said only 10 cents in every dollar stayed in the actual destination, and 90 cents got pulled out. That's not universal, but you know, it's a great way of starting to measure things. And there's some really good tech coming down the line about what's economic leakage, how do we make sure that more money stays in the host destination and doesn't leak out. And I think that's a really good point to Cassia's point on, you know, how you might be able to monitor positive impact as well.
We'll talk about that when we have our compensation session. So let's move on to monitoring and measuring.
Yeah, so I thought here we want to look at maybe three different areas. One of which is actually, you know, how do you start to, and it really fits in with the collaborating and sharing piece that Nikki was talking about. How do you monitor what's going on in the travel industry? The second I'll just talk a little bit about will be the impact of climate tech. And, you know, Eduardo talked about water shortages. We know what happened in roads. More and more assets are being hit by this. You know, so for example, the Maldives, all of the tourist estate is generally 1 meter above the sea level. Well, sea levels are due to rise by 5 meters. What's that going to do to all of the estate in the tourism estate in the Maldives? So unless we monitor this stuff, there really is going to be issues, and there's some great climate tech out there. And as we know, you know, we had 46-degree temperatures in the Med last year. Fires in roads, water shortages in Spain. These things are really beginning to impact. And unless we can monitor and mitigate and look at that, and there's some really interesting tools for climate tech that can help people protect their assets, that's going to be an issue. And by the way, you know, that's pushing up insurance costs. Of all of the claims that are going up, probably less than 50% are now covered by insurance. And the average hotelier's insurance has gone up from 1% of their turnover to 2% of their turnover. And in some places, it's 5% of their turnover. So, you know, the technology here can really help help us mitigate against some of that climate change. And then, of course, the next area is to do with carbon measurement. As I say, you know, carbon's not everything, nor is money everything, but it's damned important. And we can look at various of the different sectors to start to measure what we're doing and to mitigate that. And that goes across tourism's estate. So it could be your company. How do you look at your own GHG emissions? And not only your carbon, but your water, your waste, your energy, your business travel, the paper you use, all the areas we're looking, and start to mitigate against that. Events and MICE, you know, we know that it's a 1 trillion industry. They're very high profile. How do you start to look at the events? And again, there's some really good technology out there. There's something called Trace. There's another called Thrust Carbon that does this. They're able to look at what you've started to do as far as the mitigation on as the impact of your event, and then start to mitigate it. For all the tour operators and DMCs out there, you know, increasingly your customers are going to start to say, well, what's the carbon label of that tour? You know, am I 1 ton? Am I 2 tons? Maybe I want to start going for a 1 ton tour rather than a 2 ton tour. That can be coming B2B, and more travel companies. You know, we know in the UK, we've got people like Exodus, Explore, Much Better Adventures. You've got Intrepid, who are all well-known names in this sector, are beginning to carbon label their tours. So actually, tour operators have a great opportunity for being able to capture all the reductions in emissions that their supply chain do, and then start to measure those and actually show customers that, you know, my tour used to be 2 tons. By the way, now I've reduced that by 30% over the last few years. So there's really good ways of starting to show that benefit that travel can make on its impact. And that can be done at an aviation level, events, corporate travel. I've got to say corporate travel is all really way ahead of us already on this in the leisure sector. And there's, again, businesses like Thrust Carbon who do really interesting things in terms of giving feedback to their corporate customers on where impact lies. And I'll give you one small example, which is they run a report which says, you know, you put 40% of your customers on airlines that have committed to net zero, and 60% of your customers on the airlines who haven't committed to net zero, with a clear call to action of, hey, why don't you switch sell those customers who were on the airlines that had not committed to net zero to the ones that are trying to do the right thing. So that's just a quick resume of that, Andy. I think I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Patrick.
We can have some questions.
Yeah, that's lovely, Patrick. And just to add, I mean, it's blindingly obvious, but I'll say it anyway, that you can't actually reduce something unless you know where you are to start with. Yeah. So you need to measure, you need to sort of evaluate what, you know, where you are, and then only once you've evaluated that, then you can start making changes to your behaviors or making changes to your emissions, etc.
Well, I think the only other thing I would add there, Andy, is just to say that, you know, the green tech industry is about a 10 billion industry right now. Again, that's due to grow about 7 times by 2030 to about 70 billion. So there's some brilliant minds working on this. And, you know, although tech isn't everything, you can't only do stuff with tech. You have to have looked at your business model, committed, but tech can be really inspirational and helping. And I think that's the theme of what we're talking about here is if there's brilliant minds working on it and more money going into it, let's utilize that in our businesses.
Absolutely. Well, there's 4 brilliant minds here today, so let's move on. I think the bottom line is that obviously all of these various pie slices are all ultimately held together by data, and data is what is the glue which binds it all together. And I think really the point is that there's no one size fits all, and every business is different, and if the impact that you will find on your business, it varies very much from business to business and where you are in the sector, what industry you're in, etc., etc. So if you take some action, what tech did you use? Did you use it efficiently? What was the benefit? Was that and however that is measured. And importantly, it's important to review the technology you use on a regular basis, because technology changes, technology gets better, and therefore, you know, you can't just stay with the same technology all the time. If possible, it's something you need to review where you are as frequently as possible. And just 2 final things before we go back to the panel. Just a quick one about tech stacks. Everybody has tech stacks, and a tech stack really is all the stuff you use to do the business that you carry on. So it's your tools, it's your platforms, it's your apps, it's your software, and they're all stacked up on top of each other. And they in turn have their own footprint. Some of them work efficiently, some of them don't work efficiently. So while we're talking about technology, let's all review our tech stacks. Let's look at how we can maintain the longevity of our tech stacks to make sure that as technology changes, we move with it and we become more efficient. And at the same time, as we move stuff more into the cloud, let's also forget that the cloud technology out there actually resides in huge gigafactories, such as this one here. And there's actually quite a lot in Scandinavia, in the Arctic, particularly obviously where the climate is colder, where thousands upon thousands upon thousands of servers are all crammed into, and that in itself has an environmental implication. So that's just a final thing to think about on that. But we're going to go back to the panel. Here we are. Thank you very much. Nikki, what do you want to add on that? I mean, I think that there's so much tech here, it's almost impossible to know where to start. But I think the point is that it's really for each company needs to evaluate their particular position in the sector and what tech options are available for them at the moment.
Yeah. Well, I think the sustainability question is so wide and so vast that it's really important to try and make it digestible for each individual business, area, destination, region, regardless of kind of who you are within the entire tourism ecosystem, to try and adapt yourself to it, because we all need to take responsibility for this. And that's not just the environmental side, but also the social longevity of tourism, the economic impact. We are very much in two shifting tides at the moment. So essentially, when it comes to business need normally derives from two sets of parameters, particularly within technology. You have an operational parameter where you're looking at improving efficiencies, or you have a customer demand. Now, it's very clear from this presentation that there is a massive shift in customer demand at the moment, but there is also a shift going on when it comes to the operational efficiency of all of our tourism businesses and our future. And all of that holds that together is really technology. So I guess kind of like my message from today would be to start taking a look at your own technology, looking at what's important to you as a business, and then starting to dissect from there, where do you start? And hopefully this mini-series will be useful to everybody so that we can bring some nice solutions to the table that might make our industry better and brighter for the future.
Thank you, Nikki. And then what we will do, as I said earlier, is we'll go into each of these pies, the slices of the pies individually, and we'll invite companies along to tell us a little bit about their technology and demonstrate and show how it can be efficient for companies.
Andy, can I add something to what Nikki says now? You know, like I think when we talk about technology in tourism, there's this kind of sense of magic that computers are gonna solve, or technology is going to solve all the problems of humanity, which eventually they will do. But, you know, we forget a little bit the human factor in the whole equation. And the human factor is sometimes prostituted to profit, sometimes prostituted, you know, to commercial interests, and some, you know, like, and we see it with climate change. You know, we knew this 30 years ago, but we are now practically at the edge of the cliff, although we knew that this is going to happen. Now, my point here, and I'm going back, you know, to the social issue of tourism. I think every regenerative, transformative process requires, you know, like a grassroots movement from the people. Before we program any machine on any, or, you know, we feed artificial intelligence with data that we produce as humans. And this is, I think, what the problems of tourism realize now is that we have created this clustering of, you know, visitors versus locals, you know, whatever is aviation versus, you know, train and bike against cars, you know, and there's not about a human factor of matrix or being the nexus between these things. And hence my call before to be like, we need more that kind of technology platform dialogues to mix that matrix in something that has a human input but also a human output. Because artificial intelligence can be, and we know the risks of it, that's why the EU is also regulating it now, because we know that it's not the solution for every problem, and it could be also create also other risks. And you know, the tourism business is very risk averse. You know, yeah, we go south when things are wrong, and we go, you know, we have this, how do they call it, the resilience of tourism. Every time, you know, we rebound normally much better than we were even in previous, like, you know, COVID example. Also something that it hasn't been maybe presented in the pie is the possibility of technology to for preventing crisis. You know, this is something that it's super important in our industry. We are very sensitive to anything, whatever is climate or geopolitical or resource or anything, even like sometimes an image problem that we have now as a thing. And things like establishing early warning system, risk assessment system, simulation of potential crisis. We don't know. The reality is, you know, we have, humans forget quick, which is part of our survival instinct. But, you know, we know that improving coordination and communication would save us next time, whenever it's like, oh, we save also people's lives. You know, that we see that sometimes when a fire occurs, or, you know, with a flooding, so we have human casualties too. And I think we have the responsibility, because we can talk about technology as something very, you know, far away from us, and it will be a computer, and, you know, I don't know how that algorithm works or something, but it does that we have to tell how these machines are going to help us or not. And this is a very, very, very great, great zone right now, because we don't really know. And with regard to how all this datification of tourism is going to help us, we don't know also what is going to be the balance between profit and collaboration, how much it's going to be okay now that I have, maybe I can use it for. So here, I'm not advocating for something concrete because I don't have it in mind, but we have to be very careful too, because, history has shown us that every evolution of tourism was actually profit revenue driven rather than socially human driven for the best of the interaction between people. And as you say, the force for good. Again, Andy, I'm sorry that I'm using that. It's a claim that we always, I think it's a very nice green or moral washing claim that we do, that in tourism is an industry for, for the good, for peace and catalyst for development. It is, but we don't have empirical information to demonstrate that today. Today, we are in.
We may not have it today, but hopefully we'll have it tomorrow, or at least next week or next year. I'm very conscious that we're running out of time. I just want Patrick. I mean, we just one question on came in about mice, about how you measure mice in terms of the impact. But surely that's just the same as any business. There's no difference. It's just a different part of the sector. So
it's a different approach to the same question.
Okay.
So you need to be able to tailor what you're doing to the individual aspects of mice. Happy if somebody wants to contact me, my email's there, so I'm happy that I can answer that question and talk about it offline as we're.
We'll be sharing a recording of this with recipients. It'll be on our website anyway, so that's fine.
Andy, if I can, I know you want to wrap up, but if I can just make one quick point.
No, I do, but I'm just conscious. But yeah, go for it.
So what I was gonna say is, I think I totally agree with Eduardo's point about the human factor. Technology can inspire us. Technology can support us. It can do many things, but the change needs to start with us. And to that idea of I can almost hear some of the audience thinking when we talk about consumers really want this. A few of the businesses saying, well, not in my business. I don't see consumers clamoring for this. And we know all about the intention action gap, that there's one thing that consumers say at the point of sale, and then there's another thing they do. The only advice I would give to that is I think the writing is on the wall, and it's not up to us to be driven by consumers. It's up to us, the travel sector, to put the right product on the shelves. So to do all of these things, and once we put that product that is sustainable, that customers feel better about buying on the shelves, then we'll have something that's right. We shouldn't be driven by consumer demand on this. The consumer demand will follow, and I think that's something that's really important to get across as well.
Well, I think that's. I mean, I think Henry Ford, the inventor of the car, he said if he had waited for consumer demand, he would have invented a faster horse.
A faster horse.
Yeah. So I think we need to drive it forward, and I think very, very much so. I'm conscious it's now 9:58 in London. We've got a couple of minutes. I'd just like to wrap up and say thanks to everybody. This is the first of what will be a series. We'll be looking at each of these sectors in some detail. Again, as I said, inviting some actual companies to come along and make presentations. I'd like to thank Nikki for her contributions. Thank you very much. Look forward to seeing you later, Nikki. And Patrick, as always, thanks for your intelligence and your support and your insights. And Eduardo, thanks for joining us, and thank you for giving us a broad brush view from the ETC perspective. And it's great to have you with us. And lurking behind the scenes, thank you, Paul, at the ETOA, who are providing this platform for us to do this webinar this morning. So thank you very much. We've had a good talk about bathtubs, lasagnas, pies, and sticking plasters, and I've enjoyed it very much. It's now almost 10 o'clock, so thank you very much, and see you all next time. Thank you once again.